confirmed for its role in Enron's collapse.
Jan's mic.
Anderson and the SEC would not comment. Jan?
Thanks, Fred Katayama. And
Roll up.
coming up next, we're going to talk about steel. The case for breathing life into the U.S. steel industry has reached the White House.
Fred Scripps
President
is in there
Bush will
twice
decide
again.
by next week whether to impose stiff tariffs on steel imports that have hurt the U.S. steel industry, according to a ruling by the International Trade Commission. Nearly half of the major U.S. steelmakers have filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy since 1997. For more on steel tariffs and the White House policy decision due next week, let's go to Charlotte, North Carolina, and Daniel D'Amico. He is the president and CEO of Nucor, one of the largest U.S. steelmakers. We should point out that Nucor's stock is up more than $1 today. It's near a 52-week high. What are investors saying about your company in the market today? That the economy is getting better, or what?
Well, it's very good to see the confidence that the investment community has in our company and our strategic plan going forward, and we've been very good at communicating that to the investment community, and that's what's moving the stock, that plus the positive.
Now, it's interesting. The steel industry, including you, are backing tariffs on imports from around the world. This goes against what most Republicans believe in the principle of free trade, because this would block free trade. How can you argue that it's important to have higher prices on the imports of steel?
Well, what we're dealing with here in reality is illegal trading activities. Laws have been broken. The important thing that people don't focus on and that you need to focus on is that free trade, by definition, and I mean global definition, implies responsible trade, implies rule-based trade, not irresponsible and not illegal. There are rules that free trade is governed by, and the world has agreed to those rules. And the trading companies and the foreign steel producers have been breaking our laws, and all we're asking for is a fair and level playing field, our laws being enforced, and people not breaking.
So it's not just a matter of it's cheaper to produce steel in some other places than in the U.S.?
Absolutely not. Nucor is world-renowned as one of the lowest cost, most efficient steel producers in the world. A company that introduces new technology regularly to leapfrog the existing technologies to make steel.
But what about your competition around the world? They can make it for less?
Nucor can make steel competitively with anybody as long as we have truly free, legal trade.
What you're saying is that some international steel companies have bailouts from governments, or there's something going on that's not fair?
No, what they actually do, first of all, there's been a flood of imports over the last 5 years that have driven prices down by over 50%. What has been proven in court time and time again over the last 5 years is that they are guilty of dumping product either below their home market prices or below their cost of production. That's illegal by world trading standards.
Now, do you think that it's imperative for the survival of the U.S. steel industry to have these tariffs on imports?
Absolutely. What we need to do, the 201 and the high tariffs that we're asking for, which are 40% minimum across all the products, what we are doing here is getting a timeout to allow us to get our trading laws to be effective against the circumvention that it constantly is committed by the trading companies around the world and the foreign steel producers. It's a timeout provision. It's not a permanent provision, but it allows us to take care of the long-term problem here, and we commend the President for addressing that, not only with the 201 investigation, but also with the timely enforcement of our trade laws and the negotiations globally for reduction of global overcapacity.
But wouldn't this add to the price of cars and buildings and everything else that steel ends up in?
Absolutely not. Again, the price of steel over the last 5 years has dropped by 50%. And the price of automobiles, refrigerators, tractors, you haven't seen the prices go down by 50%. And when the prices recover to reasonable levels, you won't see the prices go up.
Dan D'Amico, he is the Vice Chairman, President, and CEO of Nucor. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Quick timeout, and then oil prices. They're climbing again. We'll get comments from OPEC that sent the prices up to a 4-month high. And speaking of highs, the market is at a high. The Dow is up almost 250 points. The NASDAQ is up 62.
Music full, kill the mic, roll the break.
And illegally siphoning off more than $200 million.
It's corporate earnings season on Wall Street, where a number of blue chips are scheduled to post results this week. Citibank, Microsoft and General Motors are among those expected to announce solid fourth-quarter revenue growth. For more on that and a look at the week ahead on Wall Street, we go to Myron Kandel in New York.
The big news on Wall Street last week was the extremely cold weather outside, but there were some hot results from the stock market. And some more good news is expected from corporate earnings. Overall, fourth-quarter profits for the S&P 500 companies are expected to jump 26%. Thomson Financial says that would be the biggest rise in 11 years. But it also says that kind of hot earnings growth is likely to cool off this year. As for a market rally in reaction to those robust earnings, one market watcher is now cautious.
Because the market has moved so far so fast in the last 3 or 4 weeks as well, I think we may see a little reaction after the announcement comes. I think companies that meet expectations may fall off a little bit. I think companies way below expectations are going to get creamed. And I think those that are above expectations are going to hold their own, maybe come up a little bit.
9 Dow components are expected to report this week, including Citigroup and Microsoft. Martha Stewart will be looking for a few good men and women as jury selection begins this week for her trial. The domestic diva is being charged with obstruction of justice and lying about her sale of ImClone shares 2 years ago. In Washington, when Congress returns to work on Tuesday, it has a huge list of issues to tackle. There's the $820 billion omnibus spending package, an energy bill, and a huge transportation reauthorization measure, and a number of other items that weren't dealt with last year. Also on Tuesday, President Bush delivers the annual State of the Union address. He's expected to highlight economic growth and successes in the fight against terrorism. Also likely to be on the president's agenda, making tax cuts permanent and the creation of tax-free accounts to help boost retirement savings. The night before the president's address, Democrats will focus on the 2.5 million jobs lost since he took office. That's at the Iowa caucuses, the first major hurdle for the Democratic presidential candidates vying to challenge Mr. Bush. They've been promoting their plans for job creation as key elements of their campaigns. Things will be rather quiet on the economic front. The index of leading economic indicators for December is expected to show a 7th increase in the last 8 months. The financial markets will be closed Monday to honor the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'm Myron Kandel in New York.
Now, after a dismal 2003, Hong Kong's beleaguered real estate market is now beginning to show signs of a recovery.
Well, investors have put worries over SARS and the territory's ailing economy behind them, and they're now pushing residential property prices solidly higher. As Kyoko Altman reports, some of Hong Kong's most exclusive addresses are now going for a premium.
In the US this week, more data that points to a strengthening economy could be in store.
Well, as Pat Kiernan reports, investors will also search for any early evidence that consumers are spending heavily this holiday season.
A new month may mean new gains on Wall Street if history is any guide. December is the second hottest month for the Standard & Poor's 500. That dates back to 1950, according to the Stock Trader's Almanac. The S&P has gained 1.6% on average in December. This end-of-the-year advance is often referred to as the Santa Claus rally. On Monday, we will get the first glimpse of the holiday shopping season, a crucial time for retailers as they reap 25 to 40% of their annual sales. Last year was the worst in a decade, but the National Retail Federation forecast a sales jump of 5.7%. That would be the biggest gain in 4 years. Many of the week's economic reports are expected to add to the slew of evidence recently that growth is broadening out. Friday's jobs report will take center stage. Economists are expecting payrolls to rise for a 4th straight month, though they believe the unemployment rate will stubbornly stay at 6%. We will see if jobs in manufacturing pick up. The sector has lost jobs for 37 months in a row now. Other reports include worker productivity, factory orders, and vehicle sales. Shareholders of the former Chrysler Corporation are seeking redemption this week. They're suing Daimler Chrysler for $2 billion, claiming they were duped into approving the 1998 merger of Daimler-Benz and Chrysler as a merger of equals. The Chrysler shareholders feel the merger was technically a takeover and they were thereby swindled out of a better share price. Daimler Chrysler's chief, Jürgen Schrempp, told the Financial Times in October that the merger was a takeover from the start, but billed it as a merger of equals for psychological reasons. In August, Daimler Chrysler settled a similar lawsuit for $300 million. The U.S. and France will hold key meetings this week, looking to close the book on the long-running executive life probe. In the early 1990s, French bank Credit Lyonnais allegedly committed fraud in buying assets from insurance from Executive Life. The U.S. is awaiting response on the latest offer from French President Jacques Chirac, who is seeking immunity for 2 executives involved in the case. The Federal Communications Commission will begin to decide what, if anything, needs to be done about internet telephony. So far, telephone calls over the internet are officially part of the unregulated internet. It's an information service, and it is exempt from telecom fees. The large regional phone giants want a piece of that action. They fear their traditional telecom services could lose a significant market share if internet providers have a big tax advantage. And that's our preview of U.S. business this week. I'm Pat Kiernan in New York.
After 6 months of testimony, the judge declares the Tyco corruption case a mistrial. Job creation finally gets underway in the United States, giving President Bush a major boost in the election year. And OPEC stands defiant in the face of global pressure. The oil cartel tightens the taps. Welcome to World Business This Week. I'm Charles Hodson. At the end of a trying week, the judge in the Tyco corruption case declares a mistrial. Myron Kandel joins us from New York with the details.
Hi, Charles. After 6 months of testimony and controversy, the trial of former Tyco executives Dennis Kozlowski and Mark Schwartz ended Friday when the judge declared a mistrial. The decision came after one juror, thought to have been holding out for acquittal, received what sources called a coercive letter. Juror number 4, a retired teacher and lawyer, caused an uproar a week ago by apparently flashing an OK sign to the defense team. Prosecutors are seeking a new trial. Kozlowski and Schwartz were accused of looting $600 million from Tyco. The trial was the latest chapter in the prosecution of corporate excess, fraud, and accounting scandals in the U.S. Signs that the long-anticipated recovery in the U.S. job market may have finally arrived. Friday's employment report showed the U.S. economy created 308,000 jobs last month, 2.5 times the amount forecast. It was the biggest gain in 4 years. The construction, healthcare, and service sector all added jobs. There were no gains in manufacturing, but there were no losses, and that for the first time in 3.5 years. The unemployment rate, however, rose 0.1% to 5.7%. That's because more unemployed people were looking for work, increasing the overall number of people counted in the workforce. While the numbers were surprising, economists are saying it is too early to celebrate.
1 month does not make a trend, and these numbers are very good, but again, we need to see a few more of these before we get really excited.
The upbeat numbers could also prompt the U.S. Federal Reserve to raise interest rates sooner rather than later. The better-than-expected jobs report received a standing ovation on Wall Street, helping stocks post a strong finish to the week. And for the first quarter, which ended midweek, the major indexes finished little changed. However, the Russell 2000, filled with small-cap stocks, climbed 6%. The long-running feud between Microsoft and Sun Microsystems is over, at least for now. Microsoft agreed to pay Sun a total of $1.6 billion to resolve Sun's antitrust and patent claims. Sun and Microsoft will also pay royalties on each other's technologies, and they announced a 10-year technology and licensing agreement to allow their products to work better together. And after suffering billions of dollars in losses over the last year, Sun said it's cutting 3,300 jobs and is warning that its third quarter results will miss expectations. Finally, for the first time in more than 4 years, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is being changed. On the way out are longtime Dow components, AT&T, Eastman Kodak, and International Paper. Joining the blue chip index, the insurance and financial services company AIG, the drug maker Pfizer, and the telecom giant Verizon. Dow Jones says the moves reflect the strength of the financial and healthcare sectors and the dwindling weight of basic materials stocks such as International Paper. And that's a look back at the week in U.S. business. I'm Myron Kandel in New York.
OPEC has personal computers.
It's a busy week in the U.S. as we head into February, and a host of corporate, economic, and political reports will likely determine the direction for stocks. Myron Kandel has a roundup of the week ahead.
Investors will be looking for a strong February for technology stocks. February is the best month for the NASDAQ in presidential election years, averaging a 4% gain. That's according to the Stock Traders Almanac. The tech stocks in the Standard & Poor's 500 index have posted a blistering fourth quarter earnings rise of 53% so far, that compared to a year ago. By comparison, according to the tracking firm First Call, the rest of the S&P 500 has reported a 30% rise in earnings. Highlighting this week's earnings calendar is Cisco Systems. Its results could indicate whether businesses are spending on technology. Also reporting this week, International Paper, Tyco, EDS, and Northrop Grumman. Even though corporate earnings are on the rise, the nation's employment picture has been weak. We'll know more on Friday. The employment report for January is expected to show the jobless rate holding steady at 5.7% and a rise in payrolls of 175,000. In December, a similar rise was expected, but only 1,000 jobs were actually added. Other reports on the docket include factory orders, worker productivity, and the closely watched ISM index on manufacturing. On Monday, President Bush will deliver his 2005 budget proposal to Congress. It's expected to show his Medicare reform plan will cost 1/3 more than originally estimated just 2 months ago, $534 billion instead of $400 billion. Treasury Secretary John Snow is expected to reassure the group of 7 finance ministers of the president's promise to cut the budget deficit in half over the next 5 years. The G7 meets in Florida starting Friday. In past meetings, ministers have expressed concern that heavy U.S. deficits could hurt the global economy. Other topics of discussion are likely to include exchange rate volatility, the rebuilding of Iraq, and aid to Afghanistan. The Martha Stewart trial is due to resume Thursday. Douglas Faneuil, the assistant to her former broker, is due to testify against the domestic diva, and he's considered the government's main witness. And aviation history will be made on Tuesday when Singapore Airlines launches service from Los Angeles to Singapore. It will be the longest non-stop commercial flight, spanning some 14,000 kilometers with a travel time of 18.5 hours. And that's a preview of this week in U.S. business. I'm Myron Kandel in New York.
Welcome back. U.S. stocks are on track to ring out 2003 with their first gains in 4 years. Myron Kandel takes a look now at what can be expected in 2004.
Stock market bulls will get a final chance to roam Wall Street before we head into the new year. And there's some reason for optimism that this year's rally will continue into 2004. One reason, because of the election factor. According to the Stock Traders Almanac, the Dow Industrials have gained ground 16 times out of the last 24 presidential election years. The Almanac points out that administrations traditionally do everything they can to boost the economy and thus the stock market to remain in power. While it will be tough to top this year's strong gains, one market watcher says 2004 won't be too shabby.
The returns from the bond market might be okay in 2004, but I think the returns from the stock market are going to be even better. You've got all of the conditions for an ongoing bull market, 4% plus growth in the economy next year, 10% plus growth in earnings, and in my judgment, you're going to see a solid stock market with about a 10% return.
Economists also expect continued low inflation and only a slight rise in interest rates. Despite the recent scandals surrounding the industry, investors continue to pour money into mutual funds. According to Businessweek magazine, investors put nearly $50 billion into stock funds this year. And on the economic front this week, the Chicago Purchasing Managers Index and the ISM Manufacturing Survey will be released. Both jumped to multi-year highs last month, but a report last week showed a drop in orders for durable goods, and that cast some doubt about the strength of the recovery in manufacturing. Also, the Conference Board's Index of Consumer Confidence is expected to rise slightly for December after surging strongly in November. It surged 10 points that month, and that report led some observers to believe this would be a robust holiday shopping season. But initial reports show it turned out to be only slightly better than last year's dismal showing. That's a quick preview of U.S. business news this week. I'm Myron Kandel in New York.
Well, over on Wall Street, too, a strong week for stocks. Greg Clarkin is in New York with the details. Greg.
Relay.
Hi there, Charles. Well, after the Saddam rally fizzled on Monday, the market progressively picked up steam and finished with its fourth straight weekly gain. That is the longest streak in 3 months. The Dow Industrials gained more than 2%, closing at 10,278, but the NASDAQ was little changed on the week. Strong earnings from financials helped reaffirm their recovery. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Bear Stearns, and Lehman Brothers all posted better than expected profits. And there were more signs of a recovering economy. The index of leading indicators rose for the 6th month in the last 7. Jobless claims fell. So did the core rate of inflation for the first time in 20 years. But that means the risk of deflation remains. Now helping the rally, long-awaited answers to cries from the investing world to clean up Wall Street. First, a new leader for the world's largest stock exchange. Goldman Sachs President John Thain was named chief executive of the New York Stock Exchange. The exchange also voted to split the post of chief executive and president. Thain calls his appointment, quote, a call to service, end quote, and says he'll be cracking down on the heavily criticized specialist trading system along with other wide-ranging reforms.
I think that it's very important that we restore investor confidence.
Read it,
I think it's important
You're going to change it in the script, 07?
Ensure that the reputation of the exchange is built on being a great, liquid, efficient market.
Thain's salary will be $4 million, $136 million shy of ousted Chairman Dick Grasso's controversial pay package. Seeking to avoid any conflicts of interest, the exchange next month will decide how to deal with Thain's holdings in Goldman Sachs. And John Reed, the interim chief, stays on temporarily as non-executive chairman. However, the NYSE still has plenty of issues to deal with. The nation's biggest pension fund is suing the big board and 7 specialist trading firms for fraud. CalPERS holds $154 billion in investments. It claims the specialist firms committed improper trading at investors' expense and that the exchange looked the other way, ignoring their regulatory duties. CalPERS has criticized John Reed's reform plan and wants to strip the exchange of the right to regulate its members. Now, there was no response from the NYSE. And mutual fund firms are beginning to own up to accusations they swindled investors for their own gain. Putnam Investments fired 9 more employees involved in illegal market timing, and the company says more heads could roll. Putnam was the first firm to fire its chief. And Janus Capital Management will pay back investors $35 million for improper trades. And James Connolly of
Emma
Fred
Shannon,
Alger
camera
Capital
next.
Management will be the first mutual fund executive to go to jail as
Standby.
part of this scandal.
Thank you.
Connolly
Take.
will serve 1 to 3 years
Standby
after pleading
pilot.
guilty to tampering with
Read it.
evidence in the
Dissolve.
investigation by New York State.
Ewan gets squid
And
next.
signs of life in the IPO market. China's
Reveal.
leading insurance company, China Life, made its debut on the New York Stock Exchange with the biggest
Reveal.
IPO of the year. Its shares surged 27% in the first day of trading. China Life raised $3.5 billion with the IPO, and this was one of the 5 IPOs on Wednesday,
Reveal.
making December the busiest
Standby.
month for IPOs in 3 years. And that is a wrap
Cue,
of This
track
Week in
11,
U.S.
take.
Business.
Make
I'm
your
Greg
music.
Clarkin in New York.
Stand by the bump.
Let's take a look at this week's action on Wall Street. Myron Kandel in New York has the details. Myron.
Thanks, Tony. New York Stock Exchange Chairman Dick Grasso stepped down this week amid sharp criticism of his nearly $140 million pay package. And some board departures are likely to follow as the exchange begins its search for a new leader. The NYSE's interim lead director, Carl McCall, says change is on the way.
The thing that I hope we can focus on now is that the board of the New York Stock Exchange is fully committed to moving forward with a corporate governance plan that will commit us to transparency and commit us to being a model for all other corporations in this country.
Richard Grasso left a mark at the NYSE that will not soon be forgotten. Alan Chernoff has that story.
Virtually everyone agrees Richard Grasso did a great job running the stock exchange. He modernized the trading system, fought off challenges from NASDAQ, and shined during crises after 9/11 and the recent blackout.
Mr. Grasso has been, in my view, a superb manager of the New York Stock Exchange.
But in this era of corporate scandal, it was Grasso's acceptance of a $140 million pay package that was unacceptable on Wall Street and Main Street.
To make that kind of money when every firm that lists on your exchange is going in the other direction is something that cannot be repaired.
Never mind that the money was a retirement package and salary Grasso had deferred for years. Grasso, an expert in marketing, couldn't spin the story his way.
This institution should not be preoccupied with talking about the compensation of its leader, but rather the policies and programs and initiatives of its leader.
Grasso's ouster because of a huge payday is even more ironic, considering that he came from this working-class neighborhood and never graduated college. He is the only person ever to have risen through the ranks of the stock exchange to the top. He did so by being smart and savvy. Even last month, minutes of an NYSE Compensation Committee meeting reveal Mr. Grasso did not think it was wise to proceed at this time with his pay package. But committee members, including former AOL Time Warner chief Gerald Levin, argued the agreement should be entered into now. Grasso said he offered his resignation with the deepest reluctance, adding, "I believe this course is in the best interests of both the exchange and myself." Alan Chernoff, CNN, New York.
The stock exchange shook off Grasso's departure as well as a series of mixed economic reports, even a hurricane to finish the week in the plus column. The Dow Industrials and the S&P 500 both gained 2%, while the NASDAQ Composite added nearly 3%. On the economic front, the index of leading economic indicators, a key gauge of future activity, rose for the 4th month in August. Meanwhile, consumer prices increased less last month than economists forecast. And as expected, U.S. Federal Reserve policymakers decided to hold interest rates steady, saying they still were concerned about a drop in inflation despite signs of strength in the U.S. economy. Tobacco stocks caught fire this week. Shares of Altria rose nearly 10% after its Philip Morris tobacco unit won a legal victory in a class action lawsuit. And R.J. Reynolds ended the week nearly 18% higher after the cigarette maker said it will cut 40% of its workforce, or about 2,600 employees. In a move intended to improve corporate governance, Microsoft plans to add 2 new members to its board of directors, including its first board member from outside the United States, the chairman of BMW. That will bring the total number of directors to 10. Microsoft also said in a regulatory filing that its two top executives, Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, received a nearly 15% increase in salary and bonus last year. Together, they earned a munificent total of $865,000, paltry by most corporate standards. But don't worry about them. Gates remains firmly atop Forbes magazine's list of the richest Americans for the 10th consecutive year with $46 billion. Ballmer, meanwhile, slipped a notch to number 11. He earned just over $12 billion. And finally, AOL Time Warner will soon be just plain Time Warner. The company's board voted this week to drop the AOL from its name, signifying to some observers that the combination of the two companies 2.5 years ago was not such a big success. AOL, or should I now say Time Warner, is the parent company of CNN. And that's the week in U.S. business. I'm Myron Kandel in New York. Tony, back to you.
Ahead on World Business this week, nay or no, it's down with the euro in any language, but is the no camp in the UK misguided? We'll examine that next. Stay with us.
Now, back to our top story, the much worse than expected February U.S. jobs report. Let's cross over to New York, find out how investors reacted to the numbers. Myron Kandel has the details.
Well, Todd, financial markets reacted swiftly to the disappointing jobs figures. Many on Wall Street believe the weak payroll growth will enable the U.S. Federal Reserve to hold interest rates steady for the foreseeable future. And that sent Treasury prices soaring, driving yields to their lowest levels in 8 months. The U.S. dollar, meanwhile, suffered its biggest drop in 6 weeks against the euro. In reaction to the jobs report on Friday, the Dow fell 64 points on the news, but bounced back to finish a bit higher. For the week, the major indexes finished on the plus side, with the NASDAQ snapping a 6-week losing streak. Dragging chip stocks lower late in the week was Intel's mid-quarter update. The world's biggest chip maker rattled investors when it cut its quarterly sales forecast, due, it said, to an oversupply of chips in Asia. But the company said demand was still strong compared to a year ago. Here in New York, a federal jury found Martha Stewart guilty on all charges in her obstruction of justice trial. Co-defendant Peter Bakanovich, Stewart's former stockbroker, was found guilty on 4 out of 5 charges. Sentencing is set for June 17th. Stewart was found guilty in connection with her sale of Imclone stock in December of 2001. She faces the possibility of a long prison term. Stewart said she would appeal the verdict. In the biggest accounting scandal in U.S. history, prosecutors charged Bernard Ebbers, the former chief of WorldCom, for orchestrating the scandal. The $11 billion bookkeeping scam led to WorldCom's spectacular collapse in 2002. The company, now renamed MCI, has been trying to restructure and eliminate its debt in bankruptcy court. It does expect to emerge from bankruptcy within the next few months. And that's a wrap of the week in U.S. business. I'm Myron Kandel in New York.
Agilent Technologies is cutting 4,000 jobs, bringing the total number of job cuts to 12,000 in the past 2 years. The cuts come after the maker of scientific testing equipment reported a first-quarter operating loss of $109 million. Agilent says economic uncertainty is to blame for the weakness in demand. The bidding has closed for Sotheby's without a sale. The auction house has been unable to sell itself despite robust business. Sotheby's says legal issues associated with last year's price-fixing scandal deterred suitors. War worries are causing Airborne to raise its rates. Airborne is upping its fuel surcharge more than 1% on express shipments and 0.5% on ground shipments. Soon, making purchases can earn you a caffeine high. Starbucks is partnering with Bank One to offer a Visa card, allowing customers to accumulate store rewards. Starbucks hopes the card will speed service and build customer loyalty.
Another busy day on the earnings front. First, Sony returns to profitability. The world's largest electronics maker says a turnaround in consumer electronics sales helped boost profits to $355 million compared to a slight loss a year ago. Sony expects profits to continue through year's end. Kellogg says a change in accounting rules helped boost its third quarter results. The cereal and snack maker earned 49 cents a share, beating the street by a penny. Kellogg also expects single-digit sales growth for 2003. Meanwhile, retailer JCPenney is raising its quarterly earnings target. JCPenney expects to beat its fourth quarter earnings per share target by 2 cents. Colder weather and discounts pushed October sales well above expectations. And gasoline prices have hit a red light. The Lundberg survey says the average price for gasoline only jumped a penny over the last 2 weeks to $1.46 a gallon.
Home Depot's earnings fell nearly 3.5% in the fourth quarter. The leading home improvement chain earned nearly $700 million, or 30 cents a share. Home Depot plans to continue adding stores, but is cautious going forward. Federated pulled out a profit in the fourth quarter. The owner of Macy's and Bloomingdale's earned $381 million, or $1.99 a share on an operating basis, beating last year's figure by a penny. Federated also named a new CEO. The leading grocery retailer, Fleming, plans to bag 1,800 jobs, or 15% of its workforce. Fleming says the cuts result from the loss of its biggest customer, Kmart. Also, the SEC is beginning a formal investigation into Fleming's accounting practices. And El Paso can breathe a sigh of relief as it secures $1 billion in financing. The financing deal, arranged by Solomon Smith Barney, will help pull El Paso from the brink of bankruptcy.
Sprint says it will cut 1,600 jobs, or 6% of its workforce, because of a slowdown in customer growth. Most of the cuts are in support areas. The company also says its PCS unit is cutting 500 jobs. Target reported a 50% rise in earnings for the third quarter and expects modest growth in the fourth quarter. The discount retailer earned 30 cents a share, beating estimates by 2 cents. Target has been using less expensive clothing brands to lure new customers. The UK's biggest bank, HSBC, will buy U.S. consumer finance company Household International for $14 billion. The deal gives geographical and product diversification to both companies. Household has been suffering this year from bad loans. And the British may soon be having donuts with their afternoon tea as Krispy Kreme crosses the Atlantic. The donut maker plans to open 25 stores in the UK in the next 5 years.
Lucent Technologies says it has settled with regulators, ending a 2-year accounting probe. Lucent says it's exempt of fines and restating its financials for the $700 million accounting error it made more than 2 years ago. Bristol-Myers still has to restate its financials, but the company is delaying them for a couple of weeks. The SEC hopes the new financials will reveal why Bristol inflated its revenue over the past 3 years. On to cable. Comcast tallied a smaller fourth quarter loss, helped by its recent acquisition of AT&T's broadband unit. The number one U.S. cable operator reported a loss of 5 cents per share compared to a slight profit a year ago. Comcast expects strong growth this year and plans to add more than 2 million subscribers. And Watson Pharmaceuticals introduces the first transdermal patch for treating overreactive bladders. The patch, called Oxytrol, has fewer side effects than internal remedies.
Summer continues in New York City again today. Temperatures in the 80s. We're supposed to be in the 60s in the month of October.
Yeah, it's been warm. It's been just like summer around here. And welcome back to the Money Gang. It's also been just like summer in the markets where, you see a rally and it fades. That's exactly what happened here today. Dow Jones Industrial Average got above 7,900 in the very early going. Some optimism early, and then it faded. Now 77.16 is the level on the Dow.
Yeah, Greg Clarkin was telling us about the weakness in the NASDAQ, and it has slipped further since we talked to Greg half an hour ago. 1169 now on the NASDAQ composite. Over to the bond market, and we'll see the direction there is up, but only fractionally. The 10-year note yielding 3.67% today, the 30-year bond with a yield of 4.72.
As we head into the critical holiday shopping season, some retailers getting a little nervous about extra inventory sitting on the shelves.
Ethan Allen's making a big step to get its products moving. It's cutting prices by up to 20%. Joy Das has been looking into this. This price cut may be a sign of things to come.
Well, you know, they're saying they're begging manufacturing efficiencies. They're able to use less resources and churn out more product. Well, you got to wonder in the end, does this mean that there's more inventory sitting on their shelves? And maybe that's why they're engaging in this promotional activity. Well, I actually had a conversation with Kurt Barnard, Barnard's Trend Report, and he says this is exactly what's happening. Retailers are seeing way too much inventory right now, and hey, prospects for the fourth quarter are looking bleak. So he says you can expect these retailers to go full throttle into promotional activity in the next few months. I want to just take a look at this chart because furniture sales is an area where consumers have been putting their money in the last year. I mean, even as consumer confidence pulled back somewhat, you can see the furniture sales have been rising. Take a look at that. You know, you can see the white line, of course, is where furniture sales are. Now, in fact, some of the home number of, if you compare the home turnovers compared to furniture sales, you can see that furniture sales, once again, is the white line.
Home turnovers? That's moving from one house to another?
Yeah, folks selling over. So there's buying new homes to furnish this new abode of theirs. You can see furniture sales have continued to spike up. Now, if you compare Ethan Allen to some of the other home furnishers, I just want to show you, depending on the price points of the kind of product that they sell, you can see how the stock is down. Now, Ethan Allen tends to have high-end furniture, so you can see it performed the worst compared to Lazy Boy, which did slightly higher, and then Pier 1's just blowing everyone away with their wicker and rattan selections, right? I mean, those things...
That's a lower end, lower price point.
Right, and those products just generally cost less, right? I actually bought a bedroom set from there myself. Now, this price-cutting phenomenon isn't just exclusive to furniture. Hewlett-Packard's new color laser printer, which actually is going to ship next month, costs $999. It's $1,000 less than its previous products in the category. And now you can get a camera, cell phone, and handheld organizer all in one device. So folks are even holding out for those items to hit the market. In the meantime, well, if you're really in need of a Palm 100, you can get that for less than $100. And then let's not forget some of these online retailers. Amazon.com has been offering heavy discounts on any books over $15, free shipping on certain orders. And how about this? Even the wine market isn't exempt. And if you didn't know, there's been a bit of a grape glut this year. So there's a lot of competition right now at the low end of wine prices. And you got to wonder, is this a sign of deflation?
Or a sign of recession when you have higher demand of the grape glut. But no.
The Ethan Allen thing is interesting because there could be an element of it that they have been thinking about cutting prices, and maybe this is a competitive opportunity that they pull prices back a little bit, reposition themselves, get some customers in the door that weren't there before. I mean, there's some argument to be made that it's a sign of deflation and things to come, but there may be some validity to the company's spin on it as well.
Well, you know, that chart I was just showing you, when you compare them to Pier 1 and Lazy Boy, I mean, they've got definitely, you know, other interest out there at lower price points that they have to compete against. So they got to get this stuff out there, and they've got to actually cut the prices, I guess, to make it competitive, right?
I guess so. Okay, Joy Das. Thanks, Joy.
DuPont says its quarterly profit will be triple